I like some ELS
I
people
don't. I
have
love the
different-
summer and I want the summer.
Yeah.
And my husband's from Florida and always wants the AC.
Hate Amy.
Stairs.
Yeah, I hope it's me.
You gotta sell some tickets. We need to sell some tickets to that wonderful Bowie Bay Sox baseball game coming up on August the 3rd at 6:15.
I can't go. I can't go to that.
Oh, wait, hold. Hi.
Five.
Hey, good evening. This is a work session initially, and we're meeting at 7 o'clock to convene a special meeting. So first of all, I need to ask if there are any information items, but I don't really need to ask
Recording
that
in
because we're going
progress.
into a work session immediately afterwards. So let's just dispense with the formalities, and if there are no objections, I'd like to have a motion to move into a special meeting.
So moved.
Second?
Okay. Madam Clerk, can you call the roll, please?
Yes. Yes.
Yes.
Yes.
Yes. Okay, the measure passes. So I'd like to call the special meeting of the Greenbelt City Council to order. The purpose of the meeting tonight is to discuss a roadway resurfacing project on Mandan Road. And City Manager Salmarone, who is under the weather this evening, pointed out to me last week and scheduled this special meeting in order to authorize some resurfacing over on Mandan Road. The reason being, the school year is going to start. What's the first day of school?
6:20.
August?
Yeah.
So it's coming up pretty fast, and so the suggestion was that if we authorize this, perhaps this work could be completed before the school year starts, which makes a good deal of sense. There's school buses picking people up and dropping people off, so I appreciate the initiative that the city manager has taken. Tim George, our assistant city manager, is with us here tonight, along with Benita Anderson. And Brian Kim, who is the acting director of Public Works. Brian, would you come up and perhaps just walk us through these proposals? Good evening. Might want to pull the microphone just a little bit closer. Just go ahead and pull the neck up. There you go. Yeah, speak up.
I don't think it's on.
There's a switch on the side, on the body of the microphone.
Oh, sorry. Hello?
Yeah, that sounds better. Miss Andrews?
Testing.
If you'd like, you could perhaps pull up a chair over here if that would be more comfortable. Just go ahead and pull it closer and pull it down.
Can you hear me? Sorry about that. So I've got some illustrations within the memo that should really kind of clear it up.
Excellent.
So we've broken Mandan up into two sections. The bottom section will be doing both lanes. Next page there. And that first picture, it'll just be the right-hand side. And this is the section that's heavily traveled by buses. It gets congested during the school year, or more congested. And down below, we'll be doing both sides of Mandan. And the reason why on the upper section we're only doing one section is because when we were in that area about 8 years ago, we did the left side was already done. Got some construction estimates that kind of break down both sections.
Okay, go for it. Yeah. First, so how long will the work take? A week, 2 weeks?
2 weeks. The actual work is probably a solid week. It is also weather dependent.
And I guess usually what happens is they have one of those grading machines that comes and sort of tears up the old pavement and has to settle for a day or two, and then the new pavement is laid on.
We'll do the milling. That's correct. So the milling will go down first. We'll have a look at the surface to make sure there's no damage to the base repair. If any base repair is required, we'll go ahead and do that at that time. You don't know the degradation of the road until you've taken off the first layer, after which we'll clean it up and then we'll do the asphalt overlay.
Okay.
And the concrete works coincide with it.
So there is some on-street parking there for the residents of Windsor Green. There are some cars that are parked on the street, so they'll have to move somewhere else when this is taking place.
That's correct. We'll give sufficient notice. We typically give 48 hours, 48 to 3 days.
And the milling machine itself, where that usually has to sit someplace for a couple of days before they do it.
Yeah, we'll find a staging area in and around the area. We'll rope it off.
Okay. Well, let's. Any questions from council? Yeah. Wait, Mayor Pro Tem and then Mr. Roberts. Mayor Pro Tem, please.
Yeah, I just wanted to ask, so it looks like in the contract that's listed, it has the amounts there are the not to exceed, but it's the full amount that we put in for the road resurfacing, I think, which includes more than just these segments. Will that be amended to be these other amounts because it lists the full $1 million for road resurfacing, or sorry, for well, I guess what was some of it was road resurfacing and some was miscellaneous concrete repairs, but it has the full amounts in the contracts rather than these amounts just for Mandan. Will that be adjusted before?
So that's an administrative thing. We don't do a new contract for every road.
Okay.
It's just too redundant. This is a draft. So
Okay.
That's why you have that. That was the approved FY totals for.
Okay,
So
Or
the
the
same
street
company would be
resurfacing.
doing all that work.
Yes, sir. That's correct.
so the contract is for all of the what is it said, Lakeside Drive, Mandan, Forestway, Centerway, Gardenway, and Ridge Road, all of it that we had set up for this year. But this is just trying to get these sections of Mandan done first. Okay.
Exactly. Mr. Samarone had asked that we put in a draft contract just so that you could review it. This
Yeah.
is kind of how we do it. Again, we don't do a new contract for every specific area. There is a not to exceed. Oftentimes, the asphalt will be less, concrete takes up, or vice versa.
Okay, Mr. Roberts.
Wondering, has that roadway been milled before, or is that the first time?
On the first picture, on that left side was milled and overlaid about 8 years ago. Approximately 8, yes, sir. So that's why we're only doing one side of Mandan, but both of these we decided to do on the lower section.
Yeah, I've noticed on a lot out in the world that it seems as though they're doing a lot of milling now, but they don't seem to do the spot repairs where everything is actually collapsing.
That's correct. So you'll notice that I am assuming a little bit of base repair in some areas. So when you see the alligatoring or the heavy cracking on the top surface, you're going to assume that the base has gone bad. So we've kind of sectioned out a couple sections, but again, you don't know the full extent of the base repair until that first layer of overlay is milled off.
When I was 16, I got a job operating a roller, asphalt roller. And back in those days, that shows how old I am, there was no milling. So we did a lot of they would go out and mark all the spots that were failing, and we would go out and jackhammer them, dig it all out. depending on where it was and what kind of load it was taking, we either put concrete in or they just fill it back in with asphalt. But it seems, to me, to do milling and then just repave over spots that are failing is a waste of time and money. All the spots that are failing should be repaired, and then
So
they're not doing that.
approximately $50,000 worth is being set aside for that base repair. Again, that can tick down or up. It's just an estimate of what we're seeing from the top layer of surface. So there is a portion of that out of about the 400,000, about 50,000, give or take, is set aside for base repair.
Okay, thank you. Hey, just one comment on the contract. Just in general, I really want to move towards having some language in our standard contracts that refers to non-performance, because I just have seen too many instances where we have contracts with vendors, and of course, things happen. But on the other hand, if someone takes a year or a year and a half to complete a project that they have claimed that they are ready to complete, I have a problem with that. Yeah. Please go ahead.
Yeah, so there isn't anything listed for striping on the cost estimate. Is that because somebody, that's done by somebody else?
That's correct. Or we can add it in later. It's a nominal fee.
Okay,
We also have the ability to do that in-house as well.
okay.
So we just thought that just to get this contractor in quickly.
So the striping for crosswalks and whatnot would happen a little bit later. Mark.
That's correct. Yeah. Shortly thereafter, the final overlay of asphalt.
Do you want to go over the cost real quick, and then we'll take some questions, comments?
So
Thoughts?
again, it's broken up into two sections. You have, the first section is about 260,000, and the
Okay. Questions from council? Okay, let's take we've got a couple of comments. Ma'am, if you could come to the microphone, please.
Make sure you got it turned on.
Oh, yeah. Try that one out.
Jay Davis, Greenbelt East, and I've obviously driven on this road many times. So I have two questions. I do remember when it was re-asphalted, and it was very nice. And then the state also did the Greenbelt Road, and somewhere after
Yeah.
the state did theirs, right at the intersection, nobody has touched that and had a lot of potholes. I'm sure. I think Mayor Jordan referred to it. So are you going to go all the way to Greenbelt Road and not,
no, it stops before that.
So who does the dead areas then?
Well, we can look into that, but we will not be going on to Greenbelt Road at this point.
I'm sorry, I can't hear you.
We won't be going on to Greenbelt Road. That's
No,
not
I
what-
didn't say go
that's
on to
correct.
Greenbelt Road, but the state
look.
stopped at a certain point, and it left a space where we were taking care of it. And so when you take a right onto Mandan off of Greenbelt, or a left onto it, that would be the southern part of Mandan, it's been very potholed. It's been very rough. And I think some repair work was done, but it does need a lot of work right in that intersection area. I don't know about the other side, but it might need the same sort of attention to it. So that's one thing. I just want to be sure that we've covered all the way to where the state left off. And the other issue is when you're restriping, I know that you restripe and also mark the parking areas. Is that correct?
Yes, ma'am.
So there are some entrances to courts that I'm hoping that we do what we're starting to do in other neighborhoods. We back off the parking a certain amount of feet so that there's more visual, able to see out without having a parked car right there. So are you going to be doing that as well?
Planning drives that, but we'll coordinate with planning. I'll
Yeah.
talk to Ms. Ruth.
Whatever
about
the
that.
latest thing is about backing up the parking, the end lines, I think is what they call them. That would be very helpful to I know that they have asked for that.
Yes, ma'am. Line of sight. We'll address that.
Okay, thank you.
Those are good suggestions. We could check with the homeowners associations to see if they have any thoughts, or planning and community development could just quickly take a drive and take a look and see if anything needs to be modified. Yes, Mr. Hartman?
Michael Hartman, 2 Court Garden Way. I have 2 areas of that I'd like to bring to your attention. The first is I would like to see these contracts also update the language that's used. In particular, where in the Section 2 work, you identify handicapped access ramps. These are, in fact, curb cuts, and they're not used exclusively by people with disabilities. And so I think updated language would be appropriate there. Also, in your estimate, and I realize this is only internal to this, but the word handicap also is inappropriate. I assume that part is where the curb cuts are, for those dimensions and stuff. So that would be on both of them. The description says handicap, so I think that we should update that language as well. The other area that I would like to bring to your attention is in the sections of the work and cleanup. I'm wondering if it's possible, and perhaps not with this kind of work, but it could be, that the contractor look for areas of deconstruction rather than demolition. And that's in case things are, there are materials that can be reused or recycled. That would be very good to keep it out of the landfill. And I don't know if it's possible in this particular job, but a lot of times a deconstruction protocol preserves materials that can be used later or in other applications or other uses. So I would wonder if that could be added as well. And then the second part of that would actually be to recycle or reuse materials that can be recycled and reused. Thank you.
Could make note of those suggestions. Appreciate it. So it would be access curb cuts instead of handicapped access ramps. Other questions? Yes, please. Yes, please.
Bill Orleans, Greenville resident. I have a technical question that I'd like to direct to the city manager, if I may.
Could you
Mr.
possibly
George,
speak a little bit closer to the microphone?
What was the total appropriated or allocated in the 25 budget for capital projects? It was with regard to street resurfacing?
It's $1 million, right, Mr. Kim?
I'm
So
sorry.
that's inclusive of
it's one.
Mandan, but these other roadways as well.
Correct.
And it's
Lakeside,
150 for miscellaneous
Fourth Way,
concrete.
Centerway, Garden Way, and Ridge Road. That's $1 million that was set aside, appropriated for resurfacing of all these roads.
Yeah, for the roadway, and then the concrete work is separate.
That's
So
a much lesser
curbs
amount of
and
money. Yeah.
sidewalks. Yeah.
Well, I note that the total for this job on Mandan, the 2 sections of Mandan, is $403,000, et cetera. But the contract reads not to exceed 1 million, and not to exceed, there's an error here, I think, but meaning $150,000. Why is the contract written that they're not to exceed the million and the 150,000, when, if I understand this correctly, the total cost of the estimated cost of the project is 403?
This was the very first question I asked Mr. Orleans. It was already answered. It's because the contract was for.
Was I not listening to you?
Apparently you weren't, because that was the very first question I asked. But Mr. Kim's explanation was that that is because it's the same company that does all of the road resurfacing. So the contract has the full amount, whereas the individual costs are just for the sections that need to be facilitated before school starts.
So this contract is a master contract with VMP for all of the roads resurfacing, not to exceed 1 million.
That's what was explained
and
before,
150,000.
yes.
Thank you very much. I should
Okay.
try listening to you
I-
better, Madam Mayor.
I do have a, broader question just about the general work to be done. I've noticed that GHI has an ambitious parking lot improvement program going on now. And some of the courts, for example, Garden Way, they are working on that now. So when would the paving, repaving take place on the other parts of the contract?
I'm not sure, Mr. Mayor, but I can look into that and get back to you on that.
Okay, thank you. Thank you.
We hope to present at the next, I believe is it August 27th, 26th? We'll have all the roads ready to present again.
Fantastic. Ms. Councilmember Niesel.
I have one question, and then also just to assuage any fear, to your point, we had Hillside resurfaced at a different time that our parking spaces were resurfaced, and it all went just fine. They did a great job abutting it all. My question is, I heard you talking about informing residents about the parking situation. How do we generally inform residents about the road being under construction? Do we have up signs, or will that go out in the email blast?
So the most effective we found is actually signage. That's what we're required to do by code. The minimum is 24 hours. So we'll put up signage, and then we'll work with PIO to get the message out.
Okay, Councilmember.
So the hope is to try to get this done before school starts, correct?
Yes, ma'am.
If it doesn't start before school starts, if for some reason they have any delays, what's the timeline? Is there a plan B for when this would occur?
We've spoken to the contractor. He's ready to go tomorrow. So we don't foresee any issues with that, and we feel like it's enough time to get it done by the 26th.
Okay. Yes, Councilmember Pompey.
I'd like to make a motion to authorize the city manager to approve the road resurfacing and concrete work as detailed in the estimate sheets for $403,234.83.
Okay, Councilmember Niesel has seconded. I don't think we need to do a roll call on this. I think it's not an ordinance. So all in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? The motion carries. Mr. Kim, thank you so much for bringing this forward and for the good work that you're doing. Public Works, yeah.
Just have one more suggestion. Even though we're starting, so the plan is the date of what is the date that you're planning to start the work?
I don't have the exact date,
Okay.
but I can make sure that everyone gets that shortly.
Because I do also know that even though school hasn't started, there are sports and activities that are happening at Roosevelt. So we also just want to make sure we're informing them, just in case there probably will be kids still walking and going to and from school.
Okay. Yeah, there was something going on over at Roosevelt. I don't know if it was an orientation or something today. There's a large number of students there in the morning.
They have summer school there, so it might have been summer school.
Yeah, perhaps it was, well, haven't really seen the summer school students. There's just a lot of them today. Okay, well, if there's no further discussion, I'd like to adjourn this special meeting of the Greenbelt City Council. So would someone like to make a motion, or can I just adjourn this?
Move to adjourn.
Second.
Okay, all in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Okay, the motion does carry. This meeting is adjourned. And we'll reconvene in about 5 minutes for the work session.
Recording stopped.
all that rebar, you know.
There's Rick.
Something went wrong.
Okay.
Recording in progress.
Hey, good evening. This is a work session of the Greenbelt City Council. My name's Emmett Jordan. I serve as mayor. Council members, would you introduce yourselves, please?
Kristen Weaver, Mayor Pro Tem. Hold on. True. I think that.
Hey, well, good evening. This is a Greenbelt City Council work session. My name's Emmett Jordan. I serve as mayor. Council members, would you introduce yourselves, please?
Kristen Weaver, Mayor Pro Tem.
Pompey, council member.
Daniel McKinney, council member.
Amy Niesel, council member.
Rodney Roberts, City Council.
Is that everybody? Okay, and Councilmember Pope is on travel. City Manager Somarone is under the weather tonight. We've got Assistant City Manager Tim George with us.
Good evening.
And Benita Anderson, our city clerk. And Miss Anderson is behind the control board in the back. So we hold these council work sessions on Mondays and Wednesdays several times a month to exchange information with community stakeholders or to gather information from advisory board staff or residents. We don't take votes or formal actions. Our work sessions and meetings are always open to the public except for executive sessions as authorized by state law. We do strive to provide reasonable opportunities for the public to voice opinions on matters being considered. We'll pause periodically for comment. Tonight, it's actually a two-part work session. First, we're talking with the CRAB, the Citizens Advisory Committee, Community Relations Advisory Board, and the Board of Elections. So with the public comment, if you wish to address council or the administration, you can raise your hand if you're in the room. If you go to, after being recognized, you can go to the podium and you need to state your name and where you're from in the city, more or less for the minutes. If you're online, if you're on Zoom, you can raise your virtual hand and we'll recognize you. Or you can submit a question to using the Q&A tab. And if you are watching on YouTube or Facebook, I believe you can send an email or cable TV to questions@greenbeltmd.gov. So with the comments, we were talking about this at the last work session. The time frame for public comments is 3 minutes. So we ask that you avoid questioning the motives of others and in general be civil in your remarks. So with that said, I did want to ask if there are any information items. I do have 3 information items that I'd like to share at the end of the meeting. Anything from the administration, Mr. George? Okay, council members, any information items? Okay, well, let's dig in. So our Community Relations Advisory Board meets on a regular basis, and back on October 13th, Robert Goldberg Strassler is here with us tonight, formally proposed that the city install welcome signs at Buddy Attic Park and Trom Hills Park in 10 different languages, including English. His intent was to provide a more encompassing welcome to people of various nationalities who may not speak English. So Rick Ransom, who is the chair of CRAB, is here, and I believe we have other members of CRAB here in the room and online as well. So Mr. Ransom, welcome. Hi. Yeah, if you pull that microphone, there's one, just pull it a little bit closer. It'll light up red when you speak.
Okay. Robert brought this proposal to have a welcome sign at Greenbelt Lake. That's how the proposal started, in 10 different languages. I have a sample of one I recently saw in a hotel, smaller than what we were looking for, but very useful and applicable. The idea was, we talked about the air for quite a while, and we decided that, we thought it was a good thing to do. A lot of presentation by Robert of what he had in mind, and that was great. And we researched a few things. And the idea was, well, which languages? So we looked at a few things in Prince George County, and came up with some. I think we cited on our proposal, but that's not really the issue. The issue is really just to let people know that we welcome people no matter who they are and whatever country they're from. As we kicked it around, we decided maybe it would be better to have this in more than just a lake. Certainly, we could have a sign at Shrum Hills Park that's easily accessible, and then perhaps expand to places in Franklin Park and over in Greenbelt Station. But we thought that Greenbelt Lake and maybe Shrum Hills was a good starting place to see how it goes. As far as materials, I think we kind of thought a wooden fence was great, but even better would probably be a composite fence made out of milk cartons and those kinds of things that get recycled, because there's no maintenance. Essentially, there's no maintenance, and you don't have to keep painting or anything. The only thing you might have to paint is the actual welcomes. As far as how the sign would look, we thought we might turn that over to the Arts Advisory Board and see if they want to do a contest and see if people wanted to design something. That's not necessary, but we just thought it was a good idea. Yes, I'm sorry.
Yeah. Hold on. So I do like that idea.
Okay.
Do you really want to ask a question right now, or do you want to let him finish?
Ask a question.
Okay.
I'm wondering what the fence is about. Why do you need?
Not a fence, just a sign.
A sign.
Yeah, just a sign.
Okay.
I'm sorry, I might have said fence, and I didn't mean to do that. As you walk in, and I think,
Like a post.
I'm pretty sure there's a sign now that probably says Welcome to Greenbelt Lake Park. I haven't looked lately, but all we're saying is let's have a sign that says Welcome to Greenbelt or Welcome to.
So many signs already that is anyone going to look at it? Because we've burned everybody out on signs.
Well, we do, but all we're saying is if there is a welcome sign, we just want to have it expanded and say it in different languages so that people know, wow, this is really a welcoming place. They even have different languages. Robert, please, you're welcome to.
Yeah, Robert, if you'd like to come up to the podium or pull up a chair and talk a little bit about. Oh. Welcome. Unfortunately, I can't say that in 10 different languages, but welcome.
114 Lastner Lane, Greenbelt, Maryland. And, okay, how I envision the sign, the welcome sign in multiple languages, not at all the sites that he's saying, but at the two, so it's not an entranceway sign, but at the two public parks, because that's where you get people from other places, including residents of Greenbelt, to come and see the welcomes. Everyone's welcome. We've got the all-inclusive sign out front, right? That's it. Just a pretty simple sign, multiple languages, including Braille, right? Just to say welcome. Very simple, not more complicated than that, and don't overthink it. Okay? Just keep it simple.
Yeah.
Okay.
And warm and welcoming. That's the community we live in.
Okay, I like the idea of bouncing it off of the Arts Advisory Board to see if they can come up with a creative design. Our planning and community development department would have to kind of think through where the locations would be. And the other touch point might be, the parks, PRAB, the Parks and Recreation Advisory Board. But, it seems like if we don't overthink it and just keep it simple, do that. Personally, I'm a big advocate of welcoming signs, and I've pushed on council for a number of years to try and actually, define the entryways into the city of Greenbelt a little bit better so that people, when they're coming up Hanover Parkway off of Good Luck Road, they actually know that they're coming into Greenbelt. And perhaps we'll get around to that someday. But this seems like a simple idea that we can kind of move forward. Yes, Mayor Pro Tem.
Yeah, well, and I think that the Park and Recreation Advisory Board and Department of Rec is going to be talking to us about the Buddy Attic Master Plan sometime before too long. I know they've had some meetings about it and some revisions going back and forth with the firm doing that. So that I think will need to be part of that, because I think especially at Buddy Attic, I think the welcome sign is one thing, but I think we also probably need some additional signage about park rules and things as part of that, part of the and that can be part of the planning with the Buddy Attic master plan, I think separate from this. I would also argue that I think that that if we're going to do Buddy Attic and Schramm, we should also, as part of a first phase, do one at Spring Hill Lake Rec Center, right? Because if you think about people coming from the metro and coming into Greenbelt that way, that's another primary entry point. I think, Greenbelt Station right now, in the Greenbelt Station neighborhood, there's only one way in and out. We don't get a lot of through traffic. So that probably, might be nice, depends on how expensive the signs are, but that if we're trying to emphasize ways people come into Greenbelt, I don't think Greenbelt Station is as high a priority, just because there's only one way in and out of the neighborhood. But I do think we should do Spring Hill Lake right there on Cherrywood Lane as people are coming from the metro, and do that at the same time as we're doing the other two.
We agree. We wanted to go a little bit of time and incremental on, but if that's feasible, yeah, that's great. We're 100% behind. Yes.
Okay. Let's see. I see a question, Jay Davis, and I don't. Wait, Miss Council Member.
I really love the spirit of this idea. I am really worried about the virtue signaling, because language 4 is 3 different languages and other languages of West African countries.
Mm-hmm.
I understand that this was just a suggestion, and I know that this is not to be overthought, but we do need to put some really big thoughts into. I will say why. Let me back up a minute. I got a business card from someone, and the backside was in Spanish, and he was so excited. And I said, "Do you speak Spanish?" And he said, "No." And so I didn't really see that point. So I really do love the idea. Braille, I worry about, how is someone who has impaired vision getting to the sign? Are there tripping hazards? Are there things that are welcoming them there other than the sign? I really, really love the sign, but I do think it requires a lot of thought, and I would like to see it go into the thought bucket with all of the wayfinding that we have throughout Greenbelt, because I don't want to end up in a situation where we one off something and then have another sign alley.
That's a picture of one I saw in a.
Yeah, that's those are very
It's not what we had in mind, but that's just an example. Yeah.
good thoughts, Amy. Those are good thoughts. Jay Davis, or some public comment here. Or also, are there any other members of CRAB that would like to speak to this? I'd like to offer that up.
This is just a suggestion. I don't know what size you were considering. If it's too big, then it's it's like in your face. Welcome, you better feel like you're welcome because we're there. But I know that for Buddy Attic Park, and probably for Schramm Hills Park, it has been suggested to have a better information kiosk. And you could then have information, you could have your welcoming sign. It would be then easier to get to the Braille because it's a whole big sign. It isn't like you're going to have to go over a street or a corner or something like that. And it also could be a place for the rules, very simple rules. I know that Buddy Attic that's part of the master plan, but it probably should be at Schramm Hills Park too.
Yes.
And might eventually be at Central Park over at Greenbelt Station. Now, as far as a welcoming sign coming from the state metro station, that you're not going to have a kiosk, because unless they're walking, and they're not going to really stop then. I mean, I don't know what kind of a sign you would have then other than just a basic sign. But I'm hoping that you think about adding it to an information kiosk. And you could put one in the center of the Greenbelt too.
And the other reason we wanted a sign is because it goes with the pledge, the city pledge, where we say all are welcome, and we want everybody to be inclusive and, safe, accessible. So,
Hey, anyone else from CRAB like to speak? Or if there's someone online from CRAB?
yeah, please, it's Shalia Laura, one of our members.
Welcome.
Hello, good evening, everyone. I just wanted to re-echo what our chairman has said, but also to what Judith has said. we did say that we wanted to be part of a bigger information kit plan so that we could have the sign and maybe say contact city address or something like that, phone number or website or something, so that the people know where to go if they needed further information. So that was part of the plan. And then for the size, I think we also, well, for the languages, I think we said 10, but if the city can't do 10, 5 may be good. Or if the city has a list of whatever the top 2, 3 languages within the city, they may be able to come up with some kind of suggestion on that. So basically, like, was it Ron or Rob said, it was just the idea that we wanted a welcome sign and then leave it to the council to come up with the details. But bear in mind that the size could be variable, the information could be variable. And I'm pleased to hear that, there will be some collaboration with the different parks as well as the public works and everyone else that's involved. So it was just the basic idea for thought for the council. Thank you.
Appreciate that. So I want to try and make this time bound. So I think the idea of making this an agenda item when we talk about the master plan and wayfinding, we can definitely come back to it because I think staff maybe needs to weigh in on it a little bit. We need to refer it to PRAB and to the Arts Advisory Board. And I think the idea of doing a little contest or something and seeing if we can come up with an attractive, simple, and informative design would be nice. Yes, Councilmember McKinney.
I just wanted to just echo one of the things that Mayor Pro Tem had brought up is the importance of the size of the sign. I think will be important. So as we bring this to a council meeting to vote on it, being able to understand the design of it, because you're also, with so many languages, it could get busy. And then you have people that also might have a learning difference or some type of cognitive disability, and you want to sort of be cognizant of that as well, not just a vision impairment.
Sure.
So once you start having all these languages, that could also be an issue for some folks that we need to think about as well.
Absolutely.
Okay. Well, this seems pretty straightforward. While we're talking about signs, I did want to point out I've noticed that some of the wooden signs in front of our facilities, it's beginning to look pretty long in the tooth, particularly over at Schramm Hills Park. The sign's pretty faded. Also over at McDonald Field as well. So looking forward to to the discussion about wayfinding, which has been pending for quite some time. So is that going to be a separate work session from planning and community development, or will we be talking about a unified wayfinding strategy when we're talking about the Buddy Attic master plan?
I think certainly Terry would be the one to kind of lead that discussion. We could maybe just introduce it in that discussion with planning, and then if there needs to be a separate work session, we could break it into a separate work session.
Okay. Any other comments from council or the public? Anybody online?
Nobody has their hand up online, and I don't know if the member of CRAB who's online, if you want to speak up, go ahead.
Okay. Well, Mr. Ransom, thank you for all of your good work on CRAB. Thank you. Yeah. And Robert, thank you for bringing us this bright idea. It's great. Thank you. So at this time, we're going to move to the second phase of our work session. And we'll be talking with members of the Board of Elections as we discuss some recommendations for how we would go about filling a vacancy on the City Council. And Steve Gilbert, who is the chair, are you the sole chair of the Board of Elections at this point?
That's my understanding.
Well, welcome, Steve. It's great to have you with us tonight. So, let's see. There was a memorandum, June 27th, 2024, to council a couple of days ago, which had your recommendations for filling vacancies for the city council. So the present law was outlined in section 32 of the charter, the Greenbelt Charter, and it allows the remaining members of city council to elect a person to fill a vacancy by majority vote. Special elections are only called if 3 or more council seats are vacant simultaneously. And that charter, section 32, has not really been amended since April of 1975. So the code there, it's pretty generic. It lacks specific procedures. So, given the tragic event, losing Councilman Gordon not so long ago, and also before that, the resignation of a council member sort of put us in a position where we had to use our discretion somewhat. We listened to the public extensively. We made some decisions as to how we filled a vacancy on council. But the Board of Elections has thought this through and talked about it quite a bit. So, Mr. Gilbert, can you? When did you first start talking about this? And
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. We were talking about it last fall, August and September, when Mr. Byrd left the council, and we had to deal with the Section 32 of the Charter, and the city attorney advised the council to fill the vacancy right away. And so, fortunately, we had Mr. Hurling fill in for those couple of meetings through the election, and then unfortunately we had Mr. Gordon pass away. So we've been talking about it since last August, September, and as part of that, we looked at what surrounding cities do. The memorandum gives you the impression that there's kind of a uniformity among the cities, and that's kind of not true. In fact, one of the cities, Laurel, which has had a vacancy requirement for a long time, doesn't even care how long a vacancy is in existence. They just they have an appointment process, and that's basically it.
Yeah, Laurel's a little different. The powers of the mayor and the way that they're set up is a little different there.
Yes, and under Article 11E, as you may know, Article 11E of the Maryland Constitution, cities and towns in Maryland have a lot of discretion how you set things up, how the charter is initially set up, how it's amended, and so Laurel has a very different process. I'm sorry, Mr. Roberts.
Mr. Roberts.
Tell you the truth, I don't really care what Laurel does.
Well, they're just an example.
But I care what we do here, and I think, and the only change that I would be willing to make is to have the citizens vote on who's going to be their next council member. That's the way it should be decided,
right?
By a vote of the electorate,
right? Not
by the city council. And we saw what happened, in the last situation we had. It was a mess. We there was no real public input there.
Right.
And we got to make sure that doesn't happen again, as far as I'm concerned. We need to make it so that when that happens, the residents vote on who the next person's going to be. That makes everything easy.
Right. And
let's go back, and I'd like to hear the Board of Elections recommendations.
Well, just as opposed to law, some of the others do it differently, and basically there are 3 choices you make at any point when a vacancy occurs. You can choose not to fill it because there's an election coming up soon. You can do the appointment among the council members. They can select a person to fill the vacancy, or you can do a special election, putting it to the voters by a process that either tracks the way the elections go now, or you can have a modified special election procedure. One thing you should note about special elections is that in theory, they should be easier to do and maybe less expensive. That won't be true if you do them the same way you do a regular election, because the main expense is staff poll workers to man the polling places, and if you have a procedure for special elections that's the same as a general election, it's going to be just as expensive and take kind of just as long. The one thing about doing a special election is you have to give the voters, number one, you have to give them notice that there's a vacancy. Number two, you have to give them the people who have put their names in to fill the vacancy. And then you have to have a process to allow them to vote and then to tabulate the results. So these things take, a little bit of time, each of them. And one thing that we did talk about in the Board of Elections, which will speed things up and make things a little bit less expensive, is to do it by mail-in only. That is to say, you could recognize or declare a vacancy. You could put out the names of people. There'd be a certain amount of time for people to put in their names with 25 signatures, 50, however you want to do it. Then the names would go on a ballot, which would be mailed to every registered voter, and they would then have a certain period of time to submit them by mail, drop box, or in person, and then we would tabulate them, and that would be, I think, easier for the voters to kind of for them to participate. Yes, sir.
Yeah, listen, can you please finish, Mr. Roberts?
Questions?
No.
Comment.
Please go ahead.
Yeah.
Well, I think that for a special election, we should drop the signature portion of it. You shouldn't have to
You
get
mean-
25 or 50 signatures. because
Right. In other words, you just
that-
put in your name.
It's a burden, and it turns people off. Some people have a hard time doing that.
Right.
If you're disabled or something, you can't go walking around getting signatures. And special election, that's really shouldn't be necessary. So,
Right. Well,
if you're
you
worried
have to have
about
some
if you're
process
worried
for nominating. Right. Right. So you have to have a procedure whereby, you at least have to have an announcement and then a deadline date by which you put your name in. And then the names go on a ballot. The ballots, theoretically, according to what I'm suggesting, the the ballots get mailed to every registered voter, and then the voters have a certain period of time to submit them. And that would be quicker, cheaper, and I think satisfy most of the requirements that you would want to see satisfied to put the question to the voters, as opposed to having the council members.
So the reason why we're having this discussion now is in the coming months, we'll be actually convening a group of folks to begin to look in at detail about making changes to the charter. So the purpose of tonight's briefing is to kind of hear the Board of Elections' suggestions, and so that we can incorporate them into that process, front-loading them into that process.
Right.
So basically, you guys suggested sort of a tiered system.
Yeah, that was our suggestion, right.
And so if it was less than 90 days before an election, council would be able to fill the vacancy at its discretion. So that sort of that situation where Councilmember Byrd resigned, what was it, about 45 days before an election?
It was the end of August.
Mm.
Yeah, there were
So
two
that
or three
really-
meetings that were attended by Mr. Hurling.
Right. And we needed to have an additional member in case there was a tie. We need 7 members, and we need to be able to function. to be able to function quickly. So the second tier was 90 to 180 days before an election. Council would be required to fill the vacancy with public hearings recommended. So if it was a little bit further out, 180 days or less, then council would still have the discretion. And this idea of discretion, what was in the charter was vague, but I think it was vague by design to actually give council the flexibility to responding to unanticipated situation, which is what happened this time around in filling Mr. Gordon's position. No one could have imagined that could possibly happen, but it did. So council had the discretion and made the decision to hold public hearings and to appoint. So that idea of leaving some discretion is something that is in the charter. The third scenario was if it's more than 100 days, 180 days before an election. So this is coming up before an election, 180 days, it's 4 months.
Yeah, 6 months. It's,
6 months.
In,
Six
in other
months.
words, from the time of an election to 180 days before the next one.
Right. So those are the three suggestions that the Board of Elections has put forward.
And I would have to say that none of the cities around us do it the way we're suggesting. They have College Park has a somewhat similar procedure from what we're suggesting, but nobody does it exactly the way we're suggesting. And we would also suggest, and you all might want to take this into consideration for the whole charter review process, the Greenbelt Charter, as you may know, is very detailed in its requirements compared to the great majority of charters you will see around the county and around the state. In 36 and 37, when they were drafting this and then approving it, it was thought, I guess, that they wanted to they wanted to encourage certain behavior, let's say, in city government and how it would work. And so they had all these ideas and they put them all in the charter. So we have now Section 32 to fill vacancies. What you all can do, and I think this is something you should seriously consider. What you can do is just have a basic section which says that the vacancies shall be filled in accordance with the requirements in the election code. And then in the code, you can set up your process and you can change that as you see fit.
Yeah. Well, I think the part about council discretion, I think it's important to actually allow council to make decisions as the situation merits, as things happen. So back in Section 31 of the Charter, that's the section that says the candidates receiving votes amounting to 40% or more of the number of voters at an election shall be declared elected. So that 40%, and you run for council, and you have to get at least 40% of the vote,
right,
to actually take a seat on council. And if you don't have the 40%, a special election has to take place anyhow.
Right. So a simple example: if there are 3,000 votes, you have to get 1,200. You have to be among the top 7, and you have to get 1,200 or more votes. And if that requirement isn't fulfilled, if you get just 5 or 6 people who make the 40% requirement, then you have a special election, and in the special election, the 40% requirement is no longer applying.
Right. So I would suggest that, in addition to these recommendations, if there's a vacancy within 90 days of an election, it seems like the next qualified candidate, if that candidate has 40% of the vote or more, should, at the discretion of council, should automatically fill that seat. Now, in what happened most recently, council used its discretion and didn't do it that way.
Right.
But I think that as far as the idea of let's make this simple and straightforward, no drama, I think that's a good policy, a good thing to have in place. So I'd like to actually put that on the table. So this notion of democracy, the idea that a special election is the most democratic way to bring people onto council, I think you have to step back and take a look at that. If you have 15 or 20% turnout in a general election, and then you do a special election and you only get 5 or 10% mail-in ballots, even if you mail them all out, that's not as democratic as just having the general election. And so, I think this idea of special elections as something, a catch-all that's going to solve, to make things more democratic, I don't think that's necessarily true. And I don't know how that's played out in our sister municipalities. I'd be interested in seeing what the turnout usually is in these special elections.
Yeah, the thing about the other cities around us is they do the elections in even numbered years and have slightly, people are just more interested in what's going on at the state, county, and city levels.
Yeah, and maybe the 4-year terms, since we're
that's
we're
another
constantly
thing,
having
right.
elections every 2 years.
Right.
The idea of a special election in between. We have a lot of elections in Greenbelt.
Yes. Right.
Yeah, so I think I was going to ask if you on the Board of Elections, if you had talked about the notion of sort of that would almost be a fourth tier of right after an election, using the previous election results to fill a seat if the vacancy occurs right after election. Did you talk about that at all?
No, that didn't come up, and I guess the issue with that is that when the ballots come in on election day, we feel like that's it, and that the process is completed, and then we start from scratch again, and we have 7 council members. If we keep the votes that have been cast, and we look to that after the election, that theoretically it sort of keeps the process open in a way that may not be desirable. In other words, we feel like it's better to have the thing come to an end on election day when we count things up, and we should really start over. And if it turns out that one person in the last election has got more votes than anyone else, then that would be something that the council could consider in the way it chooses a replacement.
Well, but I think if the tiers that you're suggesting are 180 days or more before an election, you hold a special election, then that doesn't. That wouldn't. There's not really necessarily council discretion in that. It's just if the vacancy occurs right after, the day after the election. If we're saying that this is one of the tiers, then you hold a special election, right afterwards.
I agree. Right.
Yeah. So I think that's something to think about. I think we did hear a lot of resident feedback about how that with the vacancy after Rick passed, a lot of feedback in favor of using the previous election results. So I think while that may have not have come up in the Board of Elections, we did hear a lot of feedback from residents at that time. Now that's a little bit hard to separate in some senses from the personalities involved, but we heard from a lot of Greenbelt residents related to that. So I'm not sure that I think from a theoretical standpoint, it's possible to do that. I also think that we should just mail everybody ballots and all of our elections should be all mail-in ballots, and then we don't have a difference when there's a special election. I also am not sure that I think that if we're going to change it, we should leave a certain amount of council discretion, but I think part of the problem of doing that made the process messier in November. If we know we're going to do a special election, then we know we're going to do a special election. If we know that, 90 days before an election, we leave the seat vacant, then we leave the seat vacant. I think, and then if it's in between, it's an appointment process, then maybe we have some guidelines for that in between. I think that the reason you have those tiers is to simplify the process, not open it up to more changes. There was something else I was thinking about. I was going to ask about what you thought should be in the charter and what should be in the election rules, and I think you already answered that, but there was something else I was going to ask about, and now I don't remember what it was. Hopefully I'll think of it.
Mr. Roberts.
Mr. Roberts.
Thank you, I appreciate it. I totally agree with you that when the election is over, it's over. Once people vote, that's the people that they voted in, and the election is over. And I don't think it is fair to everyone else in the city to say, okay, someone got X amount of votes in the past election, and therefore they should be appointed. I think we need to put into this really the word ethical. We have to be ethical in the way we do this. And you mentioned Laurel. Laurel really, doesn't have a lot of opportunity for public input up there. To put it mildly, there's not a lot of, not a lot of effort there. And that's the case in a lot of municipalities. And we need to do better than that. We need to be an ethical place. Not just democratic, but you can be democratic all you want and call it democratic, but if it's not ethical, then it's nothing, in my opinion. But the other thing is that I don't like the idea of putting the rules in the code instead of the charter, because the code, as you said, can be changed at any time by the city council.
Right.
And when it's in the charter, then the citizens at least have a shot at having a say in it. And that's very important. I mean, that's what our city was really based on, was having more public participation. And you can only do that when you allow it. And this past, appointment process, in my opinion, was very bad. It just was not fair. It was not ethical. Having politicians appoint their favorite person or whatever to the council, I don't think is the way to go. I think it should be up to the public, and I think you've outlined a good process, but I think it needs to be in the charter and not in the code, because we don't need, something like this that can be changed willy-nilly by elected officials, because that fundamentally is a corrupt way of doing something, in my opinion. So anyway, that's my 2 cents.
Number 10.
I remembered my thought. Although I would disagree with a number of statements that Mr. Roberts just made, but I'm not sure that there's much use in I think that there are ethical ways to appoint someone in a seat, and it is very possible to select someone based on qualifications and not just who your favorite person is. And I think that is something that we can do and have done. But the other comment I was going to make was in terms of the timeline is the only time I can think of, besides the tiebreaker question, which could come up at any time, but the only other thing I was thinking about was that I can think of when you actually need to have 6 positive votes is during the budget process. So I think that's something to think about, and I think that 6 months, that 180 days would cover that, is the idea of being able to appoint someone in a somewhat quicker process rather than doing a special election if the vacancy happens to happen right as we're doing the budget. And we can't have any dissensions. You need if there's only 6 people on council and you need 6 votes, that could hold up the budget in some senses. So I think that is the timing of that. I think this proposal fits that, but that was the thought going through my head of when it might be necessary to be able to fill a vacancy by appointment and have a process to do that in a slightly more expeditious fashion if it happens right at the inconvenient time when we're doing some budget things and we need 6 votes. If you have 7 council members, there's at least a little bit of wiggle room. If you've only got 6, then you need 6 votes.
So you're suggesting that it should be a super majority, like if there's only 5 council members, you would need.
Well, that would be another way to change it. I think that would be a thing to look at when we're doing the charter review, is if the charter should say a super majority or, something like that, or because right now it says must be passed by 6 votes. I think that would be something that's a different section than the filling vacancies section, though.
Yeah, and so. Yeah, I think it's important to do that. This thought that the process of doing an appointment, it certainly should. It's nice. It's good. It's great if we can do it unanimously, but if not, a supermajority. So filling a vacancy, it's maybe having something that's not so clean is a good thing. Maybe having discretion, having the flexibility to make a decision is actually better than having some cut process, which just constrains the public from and council from making the best possible decision. Councilmember McKinney.
A couple of questions and maybe a comment. Thank you for putting in the work, by the way, of looking at all of this.
Do it.
One of the things to think about with the special election is if we do utilize that as one of the options, whether it be tiered or all special, whatever it may be, we should probably ensure that there is a budget line item for that. And I think one of the things that what was helpful when you were going through this process in November is you actually went through the cost implications of doing a special election. And so there is always the potential that there could be a special election. So in order to make sure that we are being proactive in our budgetary process and not have to figure out, okay, how are we going to change our budget if we're in the middle of budget season, we should probably have a line item that is held for that. And as we get closer to the end of the budget year and we need to reallocate that, we can. But from what I recall, it was a pretty significant line item for a special election to happen. That is, if you do it in person versus if you do mail-in. So that's my I don't know if it's a recommendation, but something to think about when we do bring this to another meeting is making sure we have what that cost is so that we can plan for that in the budget. The second is a question around the second tier, which is around the 90 to 180 days. I think one of the other challenges I think we faced this time was the time of the year that it happened. So, one of the things you have in here is to have public hearings, but the challenge we had was that it was falling over a holiday time.
Right, December, January.
Exactly.
Right.
So does there need to be greater detail around like how many hearings there needs to be, or that they need to occur within a certain time frame so that we're not pushing the process so long if that is the second tier, because I think it just went longer because of when it fell. Right. So how do we add some detail into that tier if that is a tier we want to go with? I'm not saying one thing or the other, but to ensure that it does not go as long as it needed to go like it did this last time around.
Right. Well, one of the things that happened this last time with the 2-month process was it was all ad hoc, and so it wasn't clear how long it would take to put your name in, and whether you would need to have a petition with signatures, and then when the first or second or whatever was hearing would take place. So if we do it by a basic charter amendment and code, or have the charter do the whole thing, it should say in there that there should be a certain time during which nominations can be made, and then the ballot will be finalized and mailed out to the voters, and then they have a certain period of time to submit their ballots.
Yeah.
Sounds like you're talking this a 2-month process. Is that what you just described?
Well, no, that's what happened, and I think it was that long because of the lack of clarity in how to address things. I mean, it took a little while just to get over, Mr. Gordon's passing and so forth.
Definitely. But, to actually mail out a ballot and for people to have time to send it back in, we're talking, 2-3 weeks?
Yeah, right. Yeah,
And
I
for a
would think.
candidate to put a name in.
Yeah, I would think if for example, the mail-outs were on March 1, then they would have until April 1 to submit their ballots.
So we're talking two months at least.
Right, and the first month would be, getting the ballot together, and
Have to give people a little time to campaign as well.
You could decide that you would have a public hearing as well in a special election. In other words, you would have a hearing where people would, make their pitch, if you will.
Councilmember Pompey?
Thank you. Thank you guys for doing all this hard work. I know this has been months in the making, so I really appreciate it. And I appreciate the process that you guys go through. You've already touched on this a little bit, but I would say that if we do a special election, I do think it needs to be very clear, like timelines need to be super clear, like someone needs to be elected within 30 days and everything should be laid out, because I actually think the less discretion council has, the better. I think we should have rules that we follow, and that we should be pretty hands off on that process as much as possible. We got to let the people make their decisions, and I think less discretion for council, the better. I think, I disagreed that if someone gets 40% of the vote, they should just get moved up. I disagreed with that back in December, and I disagree with it now. I agree with you, Mr. Roberts, that when an election is over and everyone's sworn in, it's done. That election is over. And if someone, if someone were to pass away or abdicate or whatever prior to being sworn in, I think that's different. But I think once the council is seated, the election is over.
Right.
So I think that that would call for a new election, no matter how quickly it happened after that. That's what I believe anyways. I love that you have this tiered system here. I think that again, I think the more rules we have, the more structure we have, the better it is for council, the better it is for the city. Then everyone just knows what to expect. I think that's extremely important, because I think that's something that was really frustrating to people earlier this year, is that sort of nobody really knew what to expect. Things kept changing. It was frustrating for council. I think it was frustrating for the public. It was frustrating for candidates. So I think having, clear guidelines is the way to go. And I do think that, if a vacancy occurs less than 90 days before a regular election, it's not necessary to fill that. I would be comfortable if council wanted to fill it at their discretion, but I think especially, if something occurs and it's like 45 days before an election and somebody resigns, it doesn't seem like someone would need to be appointed to fill in for 2 council meetings. So it seems like that's actually more work than needs to happen. Although, granted, the council did need to do that last year because that's what the charter called for. But I think allowing, a little bit of flexibility there would be great. So thank you for this. Thank you for, this really sort of comprehensive piece that you put together. I appreciate it. And I also wanted to say that I don't think we need to wait until the charter review to propose a new charter amendment, because the charter review is going to take months. I mean, possibly up to 18 months, I think. So I don't think that we should be waiting that long for this. I mean, I would love to see have a charter amendment on this before our next election, so that we have those guidelines in place. And that is.
Yeah, we can. We did before.
So you can ask that question at the microphone in a moment. Councilmember Niesel, did you have some thoughts you wanted to share?
Well, I too, I want to thank you. And I agree with Councilmember Pompey that having more structure, the more structure we have around this, I think the better. There were so many questions and unclear answers during the entire process. And I also am very much of the mind that voting and giving the voice to the people is the most important part. So, yeah, thank you. And thank you for taking everything into consideration so that we can make some good changes for our community.
What Jenny was saying, it made me think of something else, and also the discussion of the time needed for the for turning in the ballots. I think also if we're outlining procedures, and I think I agree with Jenny as well, that having a lined out process for it that is the process we follow if necessary, and in most cases not leaving too much council discretion for, especially for the special election. But I think the other thing to think about is specifying amount of time for applications to be open, because I think that was something that we attempted to correct, but it was one of these changing rules things that was part of, I think, what we didn't do very well in filling the vacancy in November. As we had it open and then realized with the timing of the holidays and everything that we really should have had the opportunity for people to submit their candidacies open for longer. So I think specifying that and making it probably at least 2 weeks, I would think you would need to do it. You could consider whether it should be longer. I actually don't think I agree that it's too much of a burden to get signatures. If you can't, getting 50 signatures is actually not that hard. And I think if you can't go out and get 50 people to sign a petition saying you should be a candidate for city council, whether that's a regular election or a separate election, it's actually not that hard to get 50 signatures, because you can also have other people help you do that. So I think actually continuing with that requirement in the case of a special election isn't too much of a burden.
So let me just ask a question. So we're talking about vacancies. What would happen if a council member is incapacitated for a period of time and is not able to resign? Does the charter speak to that at all?
No, but in a case like that, it would be up to council whether one of their members is able to serve. You're the only ones who can make the decision.
Yeah, likewise, if a council member just stopped coming.
Right. It would. It's hard to imagine, but I suppose it's possible to have a person run for office and get elected and then decide, I don't feel like showing up anymore.
That just happened with our school boards.
Well, that's true. It does happen, I guess. But yeah, no. If a member is if their capacity is in question, that's one thing. If they're just refusing to participate, that's something else.
Yeah, but there are two scenarios that could happen and have happened in other jurisdictions, neighboring jurisdictions. So let's take a few questions. I think Michael Hartman, Jay, you had a question. Mr. Orleans.
Michael Hartman, 2 Court Garden Way. As is happens with all boards and advisory committees, the Board of Elections welcomed members of the public to attend their meetings, and I did do that over a long period of time, and somewhat uniquely, I think, Mr. Gilbert was very, very gracious in allowing guests of the Board of Elections meeting to share their thoughts and ideas. I thank him for that. I was able to fully participate in some of these discussions. So I think that that sets a very good example for all boards and advisory committees. What I would like to bring up about the special election is I would like to have you consider the election being conducted if a special election were necessary or conducted, that it be conducted as a rank choice voting system, and that would allow if a voter lists their choices in order of preference, and a candidate doesn't, then the lowest number, the candidate getting the lowest number of votes would be eliminated, and that the voter's second choice would be applied to the candidate, so that, and the process would continue until someone got 50% of the vote. I think that would simplify the election. It would make sure that the results of the elections were that day, rather than having a runoff or things of that nature. And I think that would make a very clean election. I also think you should consider that for city elections in general, but I think that that would be a good thing to do in a special election, especially when you want to have someone decided upon in a expeditious manner. So think about rank choice voting, please.
Thank you very much. Jay Davis?
Jay Davis, Greenbelt East. And I agree with what some of the council persons have mentioned. We had 2 vacancies, but they were both different. There were different situations, different time, and because of the kind of ambiguous wording, we just floundered around as a council trying to figure out the best way to do it. And it really should not have been done the same for both of them, because there was definitely a different time reference. And because we were very vague and we were trying to fill what we needed to fill, I think that's when people thought of other ideas. Let's pull someone up from below. Let's do this. Let's do that. And that's what caused the confusion and the community upsetment, let's put it that way. If we had definite rules, definite processes, then that feeling is not going to be there. You will be able to say, here it is in this particular time of the calendar, and this is what we do. And basically, you do have almost 4 tiers. If you look at your bullets, the bullets are sort of in the wrong order. If you look at the 4th bullet, that should be the first thing that would be in your charter. If 3 or more vacancies, and I was going to ask, why did you choose 3 and not 2? Because I think in somewhere it says if we have 2 vacancies, you have to have a special election.
It's 3 or more.
Pardon?
It is 3 or more in the charter right now.
Okay, so it should almost be 2, but that's your choice. So if there's 3 or more vacancies that occur at any time simultaneously, then the board should hold a special election, period. The next bullet would be the 3rd bullet down. For the period from a regular election and council swearing in until 180 days before the next election, a special election should be held. And the process should be spelled out. It should be the exact same process, maybe less time frame, but the signatures, getting a treasurer, having a bank account, whatever it is, all of that should be the same, because that person is going to be a council member, and they need to have all of the requirements that a regular council member has. The second bullet would be your next tier, and I'm suggesting that you change the dates. If a vacancy occurs between 60 and 180 days, 60 days is 2 months, 180 is a half a year. The council will be required to fill it, same special process. That would be public hearings and so forth and so on. And a special election, I mean, you would do an appointment, but you would have a process, a public hearing, filling the nominations and so on. Your 4th tier would be the first bullet. If there are fewer than 3 vacancies, you could say 2, less than 60 days before a regular election, the council will just leave the position vacant, period. And I don't think you need to have council discretion on any of that. Council discretion gets iffy. I mean, I'll agree with some folks.
You're
We
out of
would like
time.
to think the council has great discretion. Some people do, some people don't, and it gets to be vague again. We don't want the
You
vagueness
are out of
anymore.
time, Jay. Looking at the clock, we're
All
trying
right,
to stick.
I've had a lot. I would beg the council's permission to speak further.
Is that council's will? Does anybody object?
No.
Continue.
Okay. There are two things that you mentioned, and maybe Rodney mentioned it also. We do need to have in the charter a part for recall, because that would be from the people's standpoint. If they feel that a council member is not doing their job for whatever reason, there needs to be recall, and we don't have that in our charter. The other is what Mayor Jordan suggested. What if a council member becomes not able to do their job? There should be a section in the charter that says that the council has a duty, a responsibility to remove and specify what the requirements are to remove that council person and then hold according to the filling the vacancy. So those are things that we need to do. The signatures are very important. I understand that some people feel that it's a hard thing to do. It's not. It can be done. You can stand outside the post office or outside the Safeway or whatever, you can get yours. And the mail-in for special election, I think that's a great idea. That saves a little bit of money, especially, but again, maybe putting it into the budget that there's a contingency fee just in case. But I think the mail-in would work. Thank you for giving me extra time to speak. Thank you.
Well, thank you so much. Mr. Orleans.
Bill Orleans, Greenville resident. I beg council for time to exceed my allotted 3 minutes. I had raised my hand nearly 40 minutes ago to ask one question. I have a number of comments to make on the discussion tonight, and I guess I'll make them after I ask this question. The mayor asserted, no one questioned his assertion, that in the coming months, in the coming period, I believe he said coming months, there will be a convening of a commission to review the charter. I remember this discussion. I don't precisely remember when it was. Council's had its summer vacation, so it seems like it was months ago, but it was only a few weeks ago. And there was no vote that night to accede to essentially the suggestion from the assistant city manager that this commission be set up in the way he was suggesting to be set up. There was no vote. That question has not been resolved as yet. So when the mayor asserted that it's a definite thing that's going to occur, I would like to think that at least one member of council, unless they've privately told the mayor they agree with him, which of course I would argue they should not have done, that he was slightly overstepping by suggesting without question that in the coming period of time, months, there will be this commission. I'm waiting for council to make that decision. I'll have further comments then. I believe, I've always believed in a better practice of democracy. We in Greenbelt in 2024, many of us will be convinced that we have a good practice of democracy. I won't agree, but many of us will believe that. But we can always improve upon our practice. And I believe, and the suggestion has been made to council for many, many years, Greenbelt Council for many, many years, I believe that upon any vacancy on Greenbelt Council or in any other public office, but we're talking Greenbelt Council now, upon any vacancy, there should always be a special election, or if the time is too near the general election, then the office would be held vacant. The general election is always held in November. Maybe council wants to change that, but it's always, so the budget, it's not a question of a emergency nature where 6 votes necessarily are going to be involved on a question that requires a 7th member of council. If so, then the 6 remaining members of council, while 1 seat remains vacant because it's so close to the general election, will have to agree unanimously to pass that emergency 6 vote, meet that 6 vote requirement. So my view is that we should amend our charter to read that upon any vacancy, there will be always be a special election. Many other elements go into this. I I'm surprised that Ms. Davis could not remember that council has the authority in the charter now to amend the charter on its own vote. She participated in such a vote in 2009, never asking residents what they thought. They amended the charter on its own to
we're at the
expand from
3-minute
5 to
point.
7 members. Yes, I'm begging for a couple more seconds.
So-
My own view is that this and many other suggestions that council has heard over the years, and one that a prominent member of council has made his own, all such amendments to the charter relating to Greenbelt's council's election should be discussed in an open meeting, one or more, with sufficient notice to residents that these discussions are going to occur in one or more meetings, after which council should exercise its authority and be accountable truly to the residents of Greenbelt and simply vote. I look forward to more discussion.
Well, thank you. Are there any comments online? Anybody?
No. No hands raised, no comments in the Q&A.
Okay. Mr. Gilbert, so this business that's in the charter about the 40% threshold,
Right.
Is that something that you think if there is a commission that's convened, is that a topic that should be discussed as well? This process of automatically having a
Yeah, I think
runoff
I think it's
election.
worth discussing it. I
the
think
next,
I think
was it the next day, or was
think-
it within 2 days? Was it within a week? I think.
You mean for the next
When the runoff
session?
happened?
So it's like a meeting.
Oh, yeah, it's
afterwards.
supposed to be within a week. Yeah. No, the 40% requirement, I'm sure was a good government idea, but that was installed with the original charter because they were concerned that at a minimum, the folks who were going to be our city council would have some kind of mandate, maybe not, maybe they wouldn't all be 50%, but at least 4 out of 10 approved of that. They included that person on the ballot. So that I'm sure that's the purpose of it, and you might want to consider it. In my experience, it's now 20 years of being on the board. We have never had a situation where at least seven didn't get 40%. And the need for the requirement is probably long past. I mean, it's going to happen anyway. So, whether you want to include it or not, is something to talk about. But I mean, what happens with the board every election evening when the polls close is one thing we're concerned about is at least 7 get 40%, so we don't have to have a runoff the following week. We're always sort of afraid of that, and we haven't had to do it yet.
And I guess with this, with the idea of special elections, that same threshold, one way or the other, would be in place. Either with a special election, perhaps in order to gain a seat, maybe you would need 40% of the total votes in the general election, or certainly 40% of the votes in the special election. But I guess that's a point for discussion.
Again, the purpose would be the same. That if you had a special election with 10 candidates and nobody got more than 30%, that might not be a good thing.
Right. And I have one more question. It looks like you have.
Yeah, well,
some
because it
burning
wasn't always
response.
40%. It used to be 50%.
Yeah, I was about to.
Yeah, because in my reading of the archives during the vacancy, it actually used to be 50%, and then there were actually I don't remember exactly when it changed. I mean, certainly no more recently than the 60s or 70s, and possibly longer ago than that. But there actually is a lot in the News Review archives about runoffs. There were a number of runoffs back then.
If you have a 50% requirement, then you're going to have elections where you don't have. It used to be just 5 members, not 7 on the council.
Right.
But you would have situations if there were a 50% requirement, then you would certainly have elections where not that many people, where not enough people met the requirements.
And
Standards are lowered.
Right, and they were lowered, and I think there may still have been some runoffs, even with the 40 back a while, 40% quite some time ago. But I think, if I remember correctly, although it's been a while since I read it, I think after, for the runoff, it was just a straight whoever got the most votes in the runoff. I don't think there was an expectation that in the runoff you had to get, I mean, if you have fewer candidates, you're more likely to get a higher number of votes.
Right, but that's not the point. The point that I was trying to make had to do with this, with the separate special elections. I think you would want to have some sort of a threshold. But the other question,
Do ranked choice, like Mr. Hartman suggested, and then you still, I guess, have a threshold, but you do it.
One seat. I'm not sure that I follow how.
Oh, yeah, I have been reading up on this.
So hold on, let me finish, please. So the other question that I had was back in 1975, what were the modifications that were made the last time Section 32 was updated? Does anyone in the room remember?
I don't know.
I remember what I was doing was 1975. It was a good year.
Yeah, Jay Davis, Greenbelt East. I've been here since 1975, maybe 1974. We have never had a runoff in any of that time. So before then, I don't know. That would be something that you would have to ask someone who's been here for a while, or it's in the archives.
But more generally, I was asking
Pardon?
What were the modifications to the charter in 1975 to Section 32? Excuse me.
That I don't remember.
Just asking. Okay. Robert, did you have a comment? You sure? Okay. Okay, well, we've gathered a lot of important thoughts here to synthesize as we move forward. Yeah, I am deeply grateful to the Board of Elections for the work that they do on Election Day and the work that they do in between. So these suggestions are very, very timely. And as we move forward with these discussions of how a commission may be formed and how we may move forward to make charter changes in the future and also before the next election, your opinion and the opinions and suggestions of your colleagues are very, very important, very helpful. Yes, Mayor Pro Tem.
Well, I was just going to comment on the ranked choice voting. It is most often used for selecting a single winner. It's actually fairly straightforward when you do it for a single winner. It is also possible to do it for a multi-elected people. I'm not sure I've seen any examples of as many as 7. But there are some examples, and Mr. Gilbert and I talked about this a little bit, and I talked to some folks from Ranked Choice Vote Maryland at the Maryland Municipal League, and there's some pretty extensive resources online. But it would be very easy to do for a single winner, say in a special election for one seat. It would be doable. It's a little bit more complicated for multi-seat, but it is still possible to do. And I think there is also a certain amount of voter education about how the process works. I think is actually one of the bigger hurdles. The calculations at the back end can be done with a computer system and a Scantron sheet, just like we did for the elections. But I think educating voters about the way to mark their ballots when it's a very different way than most people are used to doing would be a little bit more of a challenge. But it's an interesting idea.
Okay. Hey, I'd like to kind of land this work session and finish things up because I think we've covered as much ground as we can. There's one more comment from the public. Is there somebody online who has a question by any chance?
No.
No? Okay. Do you want to take another question? Okay. Mr. Orleans?
Bill Lane, still a resident. One of the things that I was looking forward to more discussion on was just brought up by Ms. Weaver. I'm glad that she agrees that while it might seem more complicated, ranked choice voting is possible for multiple candidates. But I'd like to remind council, some will remember this, some newer to council will have only maybe heard me say it, but there has been the suggestion made to Greenbelt Council, not having been considered by Greenbelt's Board of Elections, not offered by what might be considered by council responsible people, but regular ordinary residents of Greenbelt, there's been a suggestion made for well more than 15 years that Greenbelt amend its charter to adopt a council election by district. And you won't have the problem, probably, you won't have the problem of multiple candidates running for multiple seats if it's single-member districts, because one Greenbelt council district might have multiple candidates, but there will only be one, in the end, there will be only one winner, and people can rank their choice in a single-member district. One of the things that council should be considering, without it necessitating a charter review commission, but in public session, one of the things the council should be considering is adopting an amendment to the charter having council elected by district.
Well, I mean, there are going to be many suggestions that come up over the next few months regarding charter changes, and I think we have to prioritize. I think we have to let our residents, let the people speak. And as I said at the last work session when we talked about this, I think if by some chance a commission is formed, which I think a commission is going to be formed, let them work on it. I don't think we have to have endless debates on council during work sessions on this topic. Let's let folks think about it, weigh in, and be expeditious in how we approach this, because we could easily spend months on these discussions. So, Mr. Gilbert, thank you so much.
Oh, you're welcome. Thank you.
And at this time, I do have a couple of brief information items that I'd like to share. One has to do with the Maryland Municipal League. The Legislative Committee is meeting on Wednesday, and there were a total of 20 legislative action priorities that were suggested by the 157 municipalities throughout the Maryland Municipal League. We submitted 3, and on Wednesday, the committee will be meeting to sort of narrow down the pool. We'll probably end up with 3, maybe 4 priorities. So I'm going to circulate a list to you guys, and if you would like to weigh in on which ones you feel most strongly about, I'll definitely strongly advocate for those priorities. That's the first one. The second information item is on Friday. Clark Mercer, who's the executive director of the Maryland Council of Governments, is going to visit Greenbelt at 10 a.m. So if any of you are available, I'd like to invite you to come out. We're going to give them a quick windshield tour of the city and spend some time talking. The meeting will probably go for about an hour and a half, 2 hours. So any other topics of discussion? Information items? Because if there are none, let's go ahead and call it a night.